Sabretooth? Isn't he that lame Iron Fist villain? Today we're looking at issue 41 of Wolverine by Benjamin Percy and a bunch of other people. We've got Victor LaValle co-writing with Benjamin Percy, and we've also got Geoff Shaw and Cory Smith splitting up penciling duty, and Geoff Shaw and Oren Jr. splitting up inking duty. This is part 1 of the Sabretooth War, which is the first time that Wolverine has really dealt with Sabretooth during the Krakoan era. And it says here on the cover that it's the most violent Wolverine story ever told. And it also has a big old parental advisory not for kids warning label. And I'll admit I was a little bit skeptical that it would actually be the most violent Wolverine story ever told. When I think of violent Wolverine comics, I think of Wolverine Evolution by Geoff Loeb and Simone Bianchi, where Sabretooth brutally murders Silver Fox, and then he murders and eats Feral, and then his head gets chopped off at the very end. And it's got just this amazing Simone Bianchi art. It's very graphic, it's very well done, the sense of moment is very strong. And of course there's always that issue of Punisher where Frank Castle literally steamrolls Wolverine. So Wolverine books in general are already pretty violent, and it doesn't have to be violent to be a good Wolverine comic, but they do tend to be pretty violent. And I was a little worried that if this Wolverine comic was going to be more violent than any other Wolverine comic, then it was just going to be gratuitous violence that has no point to it. But honestly, I was pleasantly surprised. So we've got this army of Sabretooths from parallel worlds who have all teamed up, and they're going to go and defeat the X-Men or whatever, and a bunch of them are cut off at the neck, which I think is a cute reference to Wolverine Evolution. The X-Men, of course, were just decimated by Orcus, so the whole Sabretooth army shows up on Krakoa and nobody is there. Kid Omega does show up, and they catch him and they kill him quite gruesomely, and then they have to track down Wolverine, who's hiding at some North Pole Krakoan base with Sage and Fang, or Dakin if you're used to him being called that, and some other unnamed expendable mutant. And Wolverine is going around talking to everybody about how it's almost midnight, and we don't know why that's important for most of the issue, but Wolverine seems pretty grim, so you know that there's something going on. And then we have this really good character moment with Fang that I'll talk about more later, but then Sabretooth shows up, and I don't want to spoil what happens, but what we find out at the end of the issue is that it is Wolverine's birthday, which is why it matters that it's almost midnight. And if you know Wolverine and Sabretooth, you know that Sabretooth shows up to make Wolverine's life a living hell every year for his birthday. That was the day that Sabretooth killed Silver Fox in Wolverine Evolution, and this tradition goes all the way back to, I think, the second volume of Wolverine from the late 80s. So we're finally getting Sabretooth and Wolverine comics during the Krakoan era, and we're also getting this cool throwback to classic Wolverine lore. And look, I have been pretty transparently not into Benjamin Percy's Wolverine run this whole time. I feel like Wolverine has been kind of sidelined during the Krakoan era. He hasn't gotten to do anything interesting since House of X, but this issue I care about. Now I'm invested. The writing is good. I think all the characters are true to who they are. Sabretooth is smart but savage. It's important that he's smart because he's a really good planner and he can almost take down Wolverine. Okay, he's a pretty smart villain. What I really like about this issue is that Wolverine and Fang are finally together again, and you can tell that they have kind of a less than perfect relationship, which makes sense because Fang spent so long trying to kill his father. And even though they're a little bit closer in this issue than I think they should be, it's justified and it's acknowledging that they're closer than they used to be for sure. So I'll give it a pass. And even later in the issue, we have Fang saying things were okay on Krakoa, but something about that place, I don't know, it felt like forcing a hug, which is really nice to hear from him because I hated what they did with him during Krakoa. They turned him into this cool, hipster, man-bun wearing chill older brother figure, and that is not Fang. He is a mass murderer. It's okay if he's turning another leaf and he's trying to become a good guy now, but you have to show him trying to become a good guy. He doesn't just get to be one overnight. So thank you, whoever wrote that line, for giving us some authentic Akihiro. And then the end is crazy. I think the issue does live up to being the most violent Wolverine story ever told. But that's not that big of an accomplishment because if you've read Rise of the Powers of X, you have an idea that the X universe is about to be rebooted anyway, so it's okay to go around killing people willy-nilly because they're all just going to show up again in a few months. So yeah, important characters are brutally murdered in this issue, but it's kind of an Old Man Logan situation where that's just the premise for this story and things will be fine later. Not like in Wolverine Evolution, where if somebody died, they were staying dead. But overall, the writing is really good in this issue. I'm finally enjoying new Wolverine comics. And the art, even though it's split between Geoff Shaw and Cory Smith, I like it throughout. I think I prefer Cory Smith's stuff in the second half, but I still really like Geoff Shaw's. I'm kind of getting Joe Bennett vibes, like less detailed Joe Bennett work from the Geoff Shaw stuff early on, but I'm also kind of getting like Doug Braithwaite vibes on some of the early stuff. It's got a sort of similar penciling style. But I mean, anytime somebody gets graphically ripped in half with all their organs spilling out, you gotta think of Joe Bennett. I really like this page in particular. I especially like what's going on with Laura's face there and the Wolverine right next to her. It almost looks like it's Joe Quesada inspired. And I love Joe Quesada's work on Wolverine. I think in general, the way this issue feels is very Wolverine, and it feels like an important Wolverine story. It doesn't feel like just more, we gotta write something for Wolverine during the Krakoan era, so let's make him do this type storytelling. It feels like real developments in his life. Don't get me wrong, I don't think this art has as much power to it as like Simone Bianchi's Wolverine or Steve McNiven or David Finch's Wolverine, but this is still pretty good. This is a step up from where we've been, for sure. I came into this issue having skipped a few things. I've got like some Wolverine issues sitting on my to-read pile that I haven't read yet, and I haven't read issue 50 of X-Force yet, which is technically a precursor to this, so I know I missed a couple of setup things, but honestly, it's very accessible. If you know that Sabretooth hates Wolverine, and you know that the X-Men are basically extinct right now, that's all you really need to know. I think you would enjoy this issue knowing very little about Wolverine. But for a longtime fan of Wolverine like me, this is a step in the right direction, and I enjoyed it. So if you want to know that crazy ending, you should go out and buy it for yourself, or I guess you can watch some other spoiler video, I don't know. Real comic fans buy comics for themselves instead of watching other people read them and saying that they're a comic fan. Buy it. It's good. It's worth your money. So I'm going to give issue 41 of Wolverine, part 1 of the Sabretooth War, an 8 out of 10. This is pretty good. I liked it a lot. It's not my favorite thing ever, but it's still way better than Wolverine has been, so I liked it. I was pleasantly surprised. Did you read it? What do you think?